I thought my husband loved me unconditionally, until I found her hidden in our home. The way he looked at her, the whispers behind closed doors, it was like I didn't exist. But the worst part? It wasn't just betrayal. It was who she was and what she meant to him. That night shattered my world in ways I never imagined. Emma and Ryan had always seemed like the picture-perfect couple, or so everyone thought. From the moment they met at a college fundraiser, their chemistry was undeniable. Emma, a 35-year-old marketing executive, was known for her warm smile and sharp wit. Ryan, a 38-year-old architect, exuded charm and a quiet confidence that drew people to him effortlessly. Together, they built a life that seemed enviable. A beautiful home, successful careers, and a bond that others admired. But Emma's world wasn't as flawless as it appeared. Beneath her polished exterior, she harbored insecurities. Years of juggling work and personal obligations had left her exhausted, and lately, Ryan had been distant. The late-night texts he dismissed with a quick explanation, the sudden business trips, and his reluctance to make eye contact. It was all adding up. Emma tried to ignore it, convincing herself that every relationship went through rough patches. Their home, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, now echoed with silence. Emma buried herself in work, desperate to avoid the growing void between them. But even her career couldn't distract her from the gnawing feeling that something was slipping away. Ryan, once attentive and loving, now seemed more like a stranger in her life. There were fleeting moments when things felt normal, a shared dinner, a quiet Sunday morning. But those moments were rare and tainted by Emma's growing unease. She often thought about their early days, how they'd talk for hours about their dreams and plans. Back then, it felt like nothing could break their connection. But now, Emma wondered if Ryan even remembered those conversations. Despite her doubts, Emma clung to hope. She believed in the vows they had exchanged and was determined to fight for their marriage. After all, Ryan wasn't just her husband. He was her best friend, the person she had envisioned spending the rest of her life with. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the nagging voice in her head. Something had changed, and Emma was about to discover just how much. What she didn't know was that her search for answers would lead her down a path she never expected. A journey that would test the limits of her trust, her love, and her own identity. Emma first noticed the subtle shifts in Ryan's behavior during their anniversary dinner. He was unusually quiet, his eyes darting to his phone every few minutes. When she asked him if everything was okay, he smiled. Too quickly, too rehearsed, and said, "Just a work thing, nothing to worry about." Emma wanted to believe him, but something about his tone made her stomach twist. The doubts only grew from there. Late at night, Emma would wake up to find Ryan missing from their bed. She'd tiptoe to the living room, only to see him on his laptop, the screen tilted just enough to hide its contents. "Couldn't sleep," he'd say, avoiding her gaze. Emma's heart told her to ask more questions, but her mind screamed for her to stay quiet. She didn't want to become that wife, the one who doubted every move her husband made. Then there were the business trips. Ryan, who used to take Emma along whenever possible, now insisted that his meetings were too short or too hectic for her to join. His suitcase was always perfectly packed, but she noticed he started carrying a cologne she hadn't bought for him. When she asked about it, he brushed it off as a freebie from work. The excuse seemed flimsy, but Emma didn't push. Instead, she began to notice the faintest trace of unfamiliar perfume on his clothes when he returned. Emma's growing unease started to consume her. One evening, while Ryan was in the shower, she found herself standing in front of his phone. It was locked, of course, but the notifications on the screen told their own story. A series of messages from a name she didn't recognize. Maya. Her heart pounded as she stared at the texts. "Can't wait to see you again," and "last night was incredible." Emma's hands trembled as she put the phone back, her mind racing with questions she wasn't ready to confront. She told herself it could be innocent. Maya might be a colleague or a friend. But deep down, Emma knew. She started noticing how Ryan's phone never left his side, even during dinner. He'd laugh quietly at messages and quickly swipe them away when he caught her looking. The distance between them grew wider with each passing day. Unable to bear the weight of her suspicions, Emma confided in her best friend, Sophie. "You need to ask him," Sophie said, her voice firm. "You deserve to know the truth." But Emma hesitated. What if she was wrong? What if this was just a phase, and her accusations would only push him further away? The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon. Ryan had promised to spend the day with Emma, but he'd been distracted, answering calls and checking his watch. "Who keeps calling you?" she finally asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "It's work, Emma," he he replied, exasperated. I've told you that. But when his phone buzzed again, Emma couldn't hold back. She grabbed it from his hand before he could stop her. What are you doing? Ryan shouted, his face flushing with anger. But Emma had already seen it, the message from Maya. Meet me at our usual spot in an hour. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him. Who is she, Ryan? Don't lie to me. Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence that followed was louder than any confession. Emma's world shattered in that moment, her worst fears confirmed. She didn't know whether to cry, scream, or walk away. All she knew was that nothing between them would ever be the same. Emma spent the next few days in a haze, the revelation about Maya weighing heavily on her mind. Ryan hadn't even tried to explain himself. He simply walked out after their confrontation, leaving her alone in the wreckage of their marriage. She found herself replaying every moment, every interaction, searching for the signs she might have missed. The betrayal was undeniable, but what stung even more was the absence of any apology or remorse. It was during this time of vulnerability that Emma found herself drawn to someone she hadn't expected, Luke, their new neighbor. Luke was in his early 40s, ruggedly handsome, with kind brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. He had moved in a few months ago and had always been warm and approachable, often offering to help Emma with small tasks around the house while Ryan was away. Initially, she thought nothing of it, but now his presence felt different, comforting, even magnetic. One afternoon, Emma was in her garden, trying to clear her mind, when Luke appeared at the fence. Rough day? He asked, his voice gentle. Emma hesitated before nodding. You could say that. Luke didn't press for details, but his understanding smile felt like an invitation to let her guard down. Before she knew it, they were sitting on her porch, sharing a bottle of wine, and Emma was telling him everything. She hadn't meant to, but the words poured out of her. The doubts, the betrayal, the unbearable loneliness. Luke listened without interrupting, his expression a mix of empathy and restrained anger on her behalf. You don't deserve that, he said firmly. You're strong, Emma. Don't let him make you feel otherwise. His words struck a chord, and for the first time in days Emma felt seen, not as a betrayed wife but as a person worthy of respect and care. As the days passed, their conversations became more frequent, more intimate. Luke would check in on her, bringing coffee in the mornings or asking if she needed anything from the store. Emma told herself it was just neighborly kindness, but she couldn't ignore the way her heart raced when he smiled at her or the warmth that spread through her when their hands accidentally brushed. One evening, as they stood on the porch watching the sunset, Luke turned to her and said, You know, I think you're incredible. The way you've handled all of this, it's inspiring. Emma looked at him, surprised. I don't feel incredible, she admitted. I feel broken. Luke stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. You're not broken, he said softly. You're just human. The air between them grew thick with unspoken tension. Emma's pulse quickened as Luke reached out, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered, but she didn't move away. Neither should I, Luke replied, his voice low, almost a whisper. But I can't help it. Before Emma could respond, Luke closed the gap between them, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that sent shockwaves through her entire being. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if both of them were testing the waters. But as Emma leaned into him, the kiss deepened, their emotions spilling out in a way that words never could. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a release, a declaration of everything they had both been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, Emma's cheeks were flushed, her breath shallow. Luke, she began, but he shook his head. You don't have to say anything, he said, his thumb gently tracing her cheek. I know this is complicated. I needed you to know how I feel. Emma's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, desire, confusion, but one thing was clear. Luke had awakened something in her that she thought had been lost forever. She hadn't felt this alive, this wanted in years. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she found herself leaning into Luke's embrace, letting herself forget, even if just for a moment, the pain that Ryan had caused. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Luke's connection deepened. Their stolen moments became more frequent, more charged. They shared everything, stories, dreams, fears. And in Luke, Emma found a kind of solace she hadn't thought possible. But with every touch, every kiss, the weight of their situation grew heavier. Emma knew she was crossing a line, one that would be impossible to uncross. One night, as they lay tangled together on Luke's couch, Emma whispered, What are we doing? Luke sighed, his fingers brushing against hers. I don't know, he admitted. But I know I don't want it to stop. Emma's heart ached at his words, torn between the comfort he provided and the storm of guilt brewing inside her. She had been betrayed, but was this any better? Was she becoming the very thing she despised? And yet, as Luke pulled her closer, his lips grazing her temple, Emma couldn't bring herself to walk away. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, and she wasn't ready to let go of that feeling, not yet. Emma knew she couldn't keep her entanglement with Luke hidden forever. The guilt was becoming unbearable, and yet, she couldn't stop herself from seeking him out. Every stolen moment felt like a lifeline, pulling her out of the darkness Ryan's betrayal had left behind. But deep down, she knew the truth. Secrets don't stay buried for long. It all unraveled one rainy evening. Emma was sitting in Luke's living room, the sound of raindrops against the windows adding to the intimacy of the moment. They were curled up on the couch, laughing softly over a shared memory, when her phone buzzed insistently. She ignored it at first, but the persistent vibration made her glance at the screen. It was Ryan. Her chest tightened as she stared at his name. She hadn't spoken to him since their argument about Maya. Emma debated answering but decided against it, silencing the call. "Trouble?" Luke asked gently, sensing her unease. Emma shook her head. "Nothing I can't handle," she replied, forcing a smile. But the knot in her stomach told her otherwise. What Emma didn't know was that Ryan was already piecing things together. He had noticed her absence, her late nights, and the way she seemed lighter, almost happier, despite their crumbling marriage. Ryan wasn't stupid, and his suspicions had been growing. That evening, he decided to confront her once and for all. Emma returned home from Luke's house later than usual, her hair damp from the rain. As she walked through the front door, she froze. Ryan was sitting in the living room, his face a mask of anger and hurt. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice calm but loaded with accusation. Emma hesitated, her mind racing for an excuse, but she knew it was pointless. Ryan's eyes told her he already knew. "I was with a friend," Emma said, her voice faltering. Ryan stood, his movements deliberate. "A friend?" he repeated, his tone dripping with disbelief. "Do you think I'm stupid, Emma? I know about Luke. I've seen you with him." Emma's heart dropped. You've been following me?" she asked, her voice rising in disbelief. Ryan laughed bitterly. "Following you? No, Emma. I didn't need to. You've been careless. The way you smile when you get a text, the late nights, it wasn't hard to figure out." The weight of his words crushed Emma. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but no words came. Ryan stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "After everything we've been through, this is how you repay me," he hissed. Emma's anger flared at his accusation. "You betrayed me first, Ryan. Don't act like the victim here. I saw the messages from Maya. You're the one who destroyed us." Ryan's expression shifted, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "Maya was a mistake," he admitted quietly. "But I never stopped loving you, Emma. Can you say the same?" Emma's breath hitched at his words. Could she? The truth was she didn't know. Her feelings for Luke were real, but so was the pain Ryan's betrayal had caused. The lines between love, revenge, and loneliness had blurred, leaving her in a storm of emotions she couldn't untangle. As the argument escalated, neither of them noticed the figure standing in the rain outside. Luke, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong, had come to check on Emma. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the raised voices drew him closer. When he heard Ryan mention his name, his blood ran cold. The door burst open, and there stood Luke, rain-soaked and furious. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his eyes darting between Emma and Ryan. Ryan turned to him, his expression darkening. "So it's true," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're the one she's been sneaking off to see." Luke didn't deny it. "And you're the one who drove her to me," he shot back. "You don't deserve her, not after what you've done." The room exploded with tension. Emma stood between the two men, her heart pounding as they squared off. "Stop it, both of you," she cried, her voice breaking. "This isn't helping." But neither man listened. Ryan lunged at Luke, and the two collided in a blur of fists and fury. Emma screamed, trying to pull them apart, but they were too far gone. The fight was raw, fueled by anger, betrayal, and wounded pride. It wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about control, about proving who was right and who deserved her. By the time she managed to separate them, both men were breathing heavily, their faces bruised and bloodied. "Enough!" Emma yelled, her voice echoing in the room. "I can't do this anymore." She turned to Ryan first. "You betrayed me, Ryan. You broke my trust and left me feeling invisible. I loved you, but I don't know if I can forgive you for what you've done." Then she faced Luke, her eyes filled with tears. "And you gave me something I desperately needed, kindness, love, hope. But this isn't the way to heal. Luke reached for her, but she stepped back. I need time, she said firmly. Time to figure out who I am, what I want. I can't keep running from my pain by hiding in someone else. Both men stared at her, their expressions a mix of heartbreak and understanding. Emma turned away, her mind racing. She didn't know where this left her, but she knew one thing. She had to find herself before she could be with anyone else. That night, as she sat alone in her bedroom, Emma felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and though it hurt, it also freed her. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Emma felt like she was finally taking control of her life. The house was silent in the days following the confrontation. Ryan had packed a bag and left that night, muttering something about needing space. Emma didn't stop him. She wasn't sure she wanted him to stay. Luke, too, had disappeared, respecting her request for time. For the first time in years, Emma was truly alone, and the weight of that reality was both terrifying and liberating. Her days were a blur of reflection and regret. Every room in the house seemed to hold a memory of her and Ryan's life together. Their wedding photo on the mantel, the couch where they'd spent lazy Sundays. But those memories were now tainted by the knowledge of his betrayal, and Emma couldn't look at them without feeling a sharp pang of pain. Yet it wasn't just Ryan she found herself thinking about. Luke's absence left a void she hadn't anticipated. His kindness and warmth had been a lifeline during her darkest moments, and now that he was gone, Emma realized just how much she had come to depend on him. But dependence wasn't the same as love, and Emma wasn't sure if what they'd shared had been real or just a way to escape her broken marriage. Emma threw herself into work, hoping to distract herself from the storm of emotions swirling inside her. But even there, she couldn't escape the fallout. Her coworkers noticed her distraction, and Sophie, her best friend, pulled her aside one afternoon. You can't keep bottling this up, Em, Sophie said gently. You need to talk to someone, if not Ryan or Luke, then a therapist. You've been through a lot. The suggestion made Emma pause. She'd never considered therapy before, but as she thought about everything she was carrying, anger, guilt, heartbreak, she realized Sophie was right. She needed help to untangle it all, to figure out how to move forward. That evening, she booked her first appointment. Therapy was harder than Emma expected. Sitting across from a stranger and laying bare her pain felt like ripping open a wound that hadn't fully healed. But as the sessions continued, she began to see things more clearly. Her anger at Ryan was justified, but so was her guilt over what had happened with Luke. She realized that she had been seeking validation from others because she had forgotten how to find it within herself. Ryan, meanwhile, reached out sporadically, sending texts that ranged from apologetic to accusatory. At first, Emma ignored them, but one day she responded. We need to talk, she wrote, her fingers trembling as she hit send. They met at a quiet cafe, the tension between them palpable. I'm sorry, Ryan began, his voice heavy with regret. For everything. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know how much I hate myself for what I did. Emma nodded, her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her. I appreciate that, she said softly. But it's not just about your affair, Ryan. It's about everything we lost before that. We stopped being partners a long time ago, and neither of us tried hard enough to fix it. Ryan's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Emma saw the depth of his remorse. I still love you, Emma, he said, and I want to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. Emma looked at him, her heart aching. I loved you too, she said. But I don't know if love is enough anymore. Their conversation ended with no clear resolution, but for Emma, it felt like a step toward closure. She wasn't sure if their marriage could be saved, but she knew she needed to focus on herself before she could make that decision. As for Luke, Emma wrestled with whether to reach out to him. Part of her wanted to see him, to feel the comfort of his presence again. But another part of her knew that what they had shared wasn't sustainable. Not as long as she was still untangling her feelings for Ryan and herself. One afternoon, as she walked through her neighborhood, she saw Luke in his yard. He looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. He gave her a small smile, a mixture of hope and understanding in his expression. Emma hesitated before walking over. Hey, she said softly. Hey, Luke replied, his voice warm but cautious. They talked for a while, their conversation easy but tinged with the weight of everything that had happened. When Emma finally told him she needed more time to figure things out, Luke nodded. I get it, he said. Take all the time you need. I'll be here if you ever want to talk. As Emma walked away, she felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was choosing herself, Not Ryan, not Luke, but her own healing. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Emma was beginning to see it as an opportunity, not a burden. She spent the following weeks focusing on herself, exploring new hobbies, reconnecting with old friends, and rediscovering the things that brought her joy. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when the loneliness crept in. But Emma was learning to sit with that loneliness, to face it head-on rather than running from it. The fallout of her choices had been messy and painful, but it had also been a catalyst for growth. Emma wasn't the same person she had been before Ryan's betrayal, and she was okay with that. She was stronger now, more self-aware, and ready to start the next chapter of her life, on her own terms. In the months that followed, Emma found herself on a journey of self-discovery. Her life was far from perfect, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was living authentically, no longer defined by her role as a wife or her relationships with others. It was liberating, though not without its challenges. Therapy became a cornerstone of her healing process. Week by week, Emma unpacked the layers of her emotions, confronting not just the betrayal but also the patterns that had led her to lose herself in her marriage. Her therapist helped her see that her worth didn't depend on Ryan's love or Luke's attention. Emma began to rebuild her sense of self, focusing on what made her happy, what fulfilled her, and what kind of life she wanted moving forward. Ryan continued to reach out occasionally, but their conversations grew less frequent. Emma appreciated his efforts to apologize and take accountability, but she knew they couldn't go back to the way things were. Too much had happened, and Emma had changed in ways that made reconciliation feel impossible. She wished him well, genuinely hoping he could find peace and learn from their shared mistakes, but she also knew that their chapter together had come to an end. As for Luke, Emma saw him around the neighborhood, their interactions polite but distant. She missed his warmth and the comfort he'd provided during one of the most difficult times in her life. But Emma also recognized that her relationship with Luke had been born out of pain and vulnerability. It wasn't fair to him, or to herself, to pursue something that had started as a way to fill the void left by her failing marriage. For now, she needed to be alone, to focus on herself. Emma threw herself into new experiences. She started painting again, a hobby she had abandoned years ago, finding solace in the way colors blended on the canvas. She joined a local hiking group, discovering the joy of connecting with nature and with people who shared her passions. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild her life piece by piece. One evening, as Emma sat on her porch watching the sunset, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The past still lingered in her mind, memories of Ryan, of Luke, of the woman she had been before everything fell apart, but they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her story, not the whole of it. She reflected on the lessons she had learned through the chaos. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can shatter even the strongest bonds. But Emma also learned that healing is possible, even in the wake of heartbreak. She had found strength in herself, a strength she hadn't realized she possessed, and it had carried her through the darkest moments. More importantly, Emma had come to understand the importance of self-worth. She no longer sought validation from others, or measured her happiness by their presence in her life. Instead, she found joy in her own company, in the quiet moments, and in the possibilities of the future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma thought about how far she had come. She wasn't sure what the future held, whether she would find love again or what shape her life would take. But for the first time, she felt ready to face it. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would meet them as a stronger, wiser version of herself. Emma took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening breeze against her skin. The road behind her had been messy and painful, but it had also led her here, to a place of clarity, resilience, and hope. And for that, she was grateful. If you've ever faced a crossroads in your life, what choices did you make? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more captivating tales of love, betrayal, and redemption. And stay tuned. Next time, we'll explore a story even more shocking than this one. Turn on notifications so you don't miss it.